Introduction. When we look at the modern world and try to figure out why we live the way we do, we find ourselves turning again and again to a small nation in the Mediterranean Sea and to events that took place more than 2,000 years ago. Much of the world around us has been heavily influenced by people we now call ancient Greeks. If you find that hard to believe, just look to the sky. Our constellations go by names like Orion, Cassiopeia, Andromeda, and Perseus. Those names come directly from ancient Greek mythology. Even one of America's space programs was named for the Greek god, Apollo. Some American cities sport Greek names. Athens, Georgia is one, and Homer, Alaska is another. Some of our most famous buildings feature sweeping colonnades and imposing columns. These elements were prominent in ancient Greek architecture. The Lincoln Memorial in Washington, D.C. is just one example. It was modeled after the Greek Parthenon. From our democratic society to our theater, and from our architecture to our names for constellations, ancient Greek culture has influenced our lives today. When we measure, map, and mold the world, we use tools that were invented by the ancient Greeks. Even when we do something simple like argue or run a race, we have the ancient Greeks to thank for showing us how to do it best. Tools of the ancient Greeks will take you through the intellectual triumphs and mechanical creations of this long gone but not forgotten civilization and show how their world has influenced ours. Biology, astronomy, athletics, democracy, logic, and reason, the Greeks laid the groundwork in nearly every field of learning you can imagine. With this book, you can follow in their footsteps. BCE? CE? As you read, you will notice dates with the letters BCE. This stands for Before Common Era. The beginning of the Common Era is marked by the birth of Jesus and begins with the year 1 followed by the letter CE. Events that occurred before the first year of the Common Era are classified as Before Common Era. The years BCE may seem backward because as time passes, the years actually become smaller in number. A child born in 300 BCE, for instance, would celebrate his or her 10th birthday in the year 290 BCE. Think of it as a countdown to Common Era. Ancient Greece and the beginnings of democracy. A Minoan. Chapter 1. When we talk about ancient Greece, we are referring to the time period from about 800 BCE to 31 BCE. Those 800 years produced some amazing ideas, inventions, discoveries, and beliefs. We use many of them in our daily lives today. But before we focus on those clever Greeks, let's take a quick look at how ancient Greece evolved. The first Greeks. Situated on the Aegean Sea, ancient Greece is considered part of the Aegean world. The Aegean world includes all of the civilizations in this area. The Minoans were the first great civilization in the Aegean world. They lived a peaceful existence on the island of Crete near mainland Greece. Archaeologists have unearthed Minoan palaces with elegant rooms and elaborate wall paintings. The Minoan culture was wealthy. The Minoans traded with other populations throughout the Aegean world, including the Egyptians, but archaeologists and historians can't find any evidence that the Minoans had an army or even soldiers. Around 1450 BCE, the island of Crete and the Minoans fell under the power of people called the Mycenaeans. The Mycenaeans lived on the mainland of Greece. They were excellent craftspeople. They built elaborate underground tombs, giant defensive walls, and the lion gate that still stands today. Like the Minoans, the Mycenaeans were traders. They traded items such as animal skins and oil. But unlike the peaceful Minoans, the Mycenaeans were a warlike people. The most famous Mycenaean battle of all is one you'll hear more about later, the Battle of Troy in the Trojan War. The mighty Mycenaeans fell under attack between 1200 and 1150 BCE. In less than 100 years, the Mycenaeans abandoned their civilization, leaving few clues as to how they lived. This time period from about 1100 to 800 BCE is known as the Greek Dark Age because all written language and signs of culture completely disappeared. Most historians think that those who survived the upheaval settled into an agricultural, almost tribal way of life. A Mycenaean. Italy, Black Sea, Greece, Sicily, Aegean Sea, Mediterranean Sea, Cyprus, Libya, Egypt. 1600. All dates are BCE and approximate in many cases. Minoans fall under power of Mycenaeans. Mycenaean period. Trojan War fought between early Greeks and city of Troy. Mycenaeans come under attack and their culture disappears. 1100. Dark Age. 900 BCE. Worship of traditional Greek gods begins. The Iliad and Odyssey legends written about the Trojan War. 800. 776 BCE. First Olympic Games. Archaic period. Greek city-states spread throughout the Aegean and Mediterranean world during this period. 480. Classical period. Democracy, art, science, literature, and philosophy flourished during this time. 323. Hellenistic period. Greek culture flourishes and spreads, but ancient Greek gradually loses its independence. 31. The age of the Mycenaeans is described in two of the most famous stories in all of literature, Homer's Iliad and Odyssey. These famous poems tell stories about the Mycenaean civilization and give us some idea of what life must have been like before the Greek Dark Age. Around 800 BCE, small agricultural communities slowly expanded into larger settlements. These settlements extended from mainland Greece across islands scattered throughout the Aegean Sea and to Asia Minor. This peninsula of land across the Aegean Sea from mainland Greece is what we now know as Turkey. Greek colonies even developed in areas that are now Italy, Spain, and Egypt. Ancient Greece covered a lot of ground, but it wasn't a single country with one ruler or government like it is today. Instead, those small settlements became a collection of more than 1,000 isolated city-states called poleis. There weren't any Greeks in ancient Greece. That term was given to the people of Greece generations later by the Romans. The people were now known as ancient Greeks, called themselves Hellenes, after Helen of Troy. Hellenic means Greek. The Trojan horse. Greek poleis. A typical city-state called a polis was made up of a central town surrounded by smaller villages and agricultural lands. The central towns were built around a hill called an acropolis. The acropolis was fortified against wartime attacks and offered a clear view of attackers as well as protection to the citizens. Words to know. Archaeologist, someone who studies the tools, buildings, graves, and other objects of people who lived in the past to learn about their culture. Polis, a city-state, plural poleis. Acropolis, high place of the city. Know your ancient Greeks. Helen. According to legend, Helen was the most beautiful woman in the world. She was the daughter of the Greek god Zeus and a mortal queen, Leda. Men came from all over ancient Greece hoping to marry the Spartan princess. Helen had to obey the wishes of her mortal father, Tyndarchus, and she married a man named Menelaus, king of Sparta. The goddess Aphrodite had other plans for Helen. Aphrodite was in debt to a man named Paris because he had chosen her as the most beautiful of three women in a contest. In payment, Aphrodite offered up the beautiful Helen to Paris and made Paris so attractive that Helen wouldn't be able to refuse him. While Menelaus was away, Paris charmed Helen. People debate whether Paris kidnapped Helen or she ran away with him, but in any case, Menelaus was not happy. When Paris and Helen reached Troy, they were married. Menelaus and his brother Agamemnon followed with an army of men to retrieve Helen, and that's how the Trojan War began in about 1200 BCE. Each city-state had its own traditions and government. Ancient Greece, therefore, was not one country, but a bunch of tiny nations. The period in ancient Greece from 800 to 500 BCE is called the Archaic period. During this time, many city-states were ruled by king-like figures known as the basileus. People soon tired of this type of leadership and overthrew these rulers. It was within these city-states that the first democratic government was tested. A new kind of government. Like most ancient Greek city-states in the Archaic period, Athens was ruled by a king. A council of nobles, called the Areopagus, served under the Athenian king. As Athens thrived, the nobles grew richer, gaining money, land, and power. As the members of the Areopagus grew more powerful, the king lost power. Over time, Athens evolved into an oligarchy, meaning ruled by a few. Greek king or basileus. From around 700 to 500 BCE, Athens was ruled by an oligarchy, but since the rulers were wealthy aristocrats, the common people grew more and more frustrated. As the people became more vocal about their complaints, most oligarchies were gradually replaced by a democracy. In about 500 BCE, democracy became the favored form of government. This early democracy was a step in the right direction, but it didn't allow all citizens to participate. Only free, male citizens were allowed to take part in government decisions. In Athens, the Areopagus, not the people, elected 9 rulers called archons to run the city-state, but the archons couldn't make a decision without the approval of the Areopagus, so the Areopagus had the final word. Archons ruled for 1 year and met weekly to discuss things like taxes and war. Commoners were allowed to attend the assembly to speak out about a case as long as they were male. Areopagus appoints archons and has final say on all matters of state. 9 archons to run the city-state. Words to know. Archaic. From a much earlier period of time, the earliest phases of a culture. Basileus, a Greek king. Athens, the culture center of ancient Greece. Areopagus, a council of nobles beneath the king. Oligarchy, ruled by a few. Democracy, ruled by the people. Archon, after the age of kings, city-states were ruled by 9 archons. Oligarchy, ruled by a few, 700 BCE, 600 BCE, 590s BCE, Solon reforms political system. Period of anarchy, 546 to 528 BCE. Pisistratus restores order to Athens, increases power to courts, and creates more balanced government. Democracy, ruled by the people, 500 BCE, 508 to 502 BCE. Cleisthenes creates the democracy, grants citizenship to all free men, and 1 vote to each man. Because the archons were appointed by the wealthy, things were still unfair for the common people. While wheat farmers struggled to grow successful crops, the vineyards and olive groves thrived. Guess who owned many of them? The wealthy men of the Areopagus. While the men of the Areopagus sold their wine and olive oil and became richer, the wheat farmers who couldn't provide enough wheat for Athens grew poorer and poorer. In order to pay off their debts, poor wheat farmers were forced to sell their wives and children, and sometimes even themselves, into slavery. In Athens, groups of poor and middle-class citizens complained about the way their city-state was run. They demanded to be given some power to make laws. In 594 BCE, the Areopagus recognized that the people were ready to revolt. Homer's Iliad and Odyssey. The Iliad tells the story of a single event that occurred during the 9th year of the Trojan War. Achilles, a Greek warrior, became angry at the Greek leader Agamemnon when Agamemnon took a slave who belonged to Achilles. In retaliation, Achilles withdrew from battle and prayed that the war would turn against the Greeks, and it did. Achilles finally returned to battle when his best friend was killed by the great Trojan hero Hector. In the Odyssey, Homer tells of Odysseus' long journey home after the Trojan War. Delayed for 10 years by the gods, Odysseus encounters much trouble on the way and falls in love with the goddess Calypso. But when given the choice between staying with Calypso and becoming immortal, or returning to his wife who was waiting at home, Odysseus chooses to continue home. Agamemnon.